Hello everybody. In this short video we're going to be taking a look at the issues of internationalization of businesses and internationalization strategy. We'll look particularly at issues of how to internationalize your business, how to determine a target for internationalization, and we'll try to present some basic tools to analyze these different strategies. So let's get started and let's discover some of the strategies of internationalization. So internationalization obviously is being done by a lot of corporations today. The strategies that corporations are choosing to internationalize, however, can vary from one organization to the next. Some very impressive examples of internationalization would be, for example, Airbus opening its first commercial aircraft production site in the United States in 2015. Airbus was in front of or facing some significant tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, and to overcome these tariffs, Airbus was able to invest and build its own facilities to assemble airplanes within the United States, and the components avoided the tariffs. Another example of internationalization would be, for example, cognac. Cognac is an extremely well-known product overall. What's quite impressive about cognac, which is again made in France, is that 98% of the production of cognac is exported, and that principally towards North America and Asia. So it's not a product that's consumed locally. It's a product that's mostly consumed abroad. But internationalization is not as easy as one might think. Internationalization creates a lot of problems, can be very problematic for a lot of companies. In fact, about 4% of companies export goods and services in France today, which includes about 125,000 small and medium-sized corporations, which is significantly less than the 200,000 that are exporting from Italy and 300,000 from Germany. And if you look over the various constraints they're facing, well, they're facing financial constraints to exporting, rules, etc., but also cultural issues, and it's not necessarily part of the business culture to export and to go abroad. So while internationalization offers many opportunities, it's not a obvious win by far. It's a lot of work, and it's not an obvious thing for a lot of companies to do. And we don't see, at least in France, probably enough companies doing export or going international for various reasons. So this is our, as you know, our strategic, our plan for the course. We've studied just about all of these final subjects, and we have the issue of international left, and that's the goal for our lecture today. So let's take a look again at international strategies. The topics that we'll discuss are many. We'll first start with the topic of internationalization drivers. You know, why do we want to go abroad? We'll then look at some of the advantages of internationalization, and mixing those two, we'll be able to define our international strategy. How, in what way we want to go international, if you will. Then we have to choose a market within which we want to go international. We want to go abroad. Well, into what market shall we go? And there's obviously some reasons for choosing one market over another one. And lastly, we'll look at the questions of mode of entry. We've chosen to go abroad. We've chosen to become an international organization. Now we want to choose how we enter the market. So this is our path here. We'll start with international drivers. We'll then look at sources of advantages of internationalization. We'll then look at the different choices offered to an organization in terms of strategy, how we want to go. We'll then look at choosing the market for internationalization and the different modes of entry available to an organization. So let's take a look at internationalization drivers to better understand what drives an organization to internationalize. So, what are the opportunities and challenges of internationalization? A lot of opportunities are out there. Today we see an economy where we have fewer and fewer trade barriers, so it's much easier to internationalize our activities. We have many more investment opportunities to internationalize. We have a population that's very mobile, so we have people moving around. We are becoming more and more global citizens, and these global citizens are looking for global products and similar products as they move around the world. We have communication technologies that facilitate working at a distance, so we can easily, for example, go to a different country, work with employees from different countries with fewer problems than before. The laws for international strategy are clear, or becoming clearer, let's put it that way. And we have a lot of more and more powerful economic zones, like the BRIC countries. NAFTA was already quite large, but these emerging large economic zones provide us with some significant opportunities for internationalization. If those are the positive, there's some negatives as well. Some barriers still exist. A lot of countries, still will promote what they call infant industries. So they'll say, well, we have some industries that are just emerging, or they're young industries. We need to protect them from competition from abroad. And so we're going to put up some sort of tariff barrier or a non-tariff barrier to protect these industries. The same is true with strategic industries. Sometimes a country will declare an industry to be of particular strategic value, for example, defense. And so it's very difficult to go and sell defense products, for example, to foreign countries. So there's a lot of barriers still that do exist to international and free trade. Secondly, needs and wants are not homogeneous everywhere. The needs and wants do vary from one country to the next. And we'll see later on in this lecture that, well, some products are specifically designed for certain types of consumers. So to go international, to take your company international, also means to better understand what are the specific needs and wants of a particular nation, of a particular type of customer, and are you ready, or is your company ready to adapt its products and services to those different types of customers. We also have heterogeneous product constraints. A pretty good example, on the right you've got the various DVD zones. You can buy a DVD and you can watch a movie, but you can't use the same DVD in different countries. Television standards are not the same in different countries. There's still a lot of product constraints that exist as you move from one market to the next. And a product in one country may not work literally in another market. A very simple example, we have, for example, electrical products work on different volts in Europe and in North America. I mean, these are just constraints that we've put on products and the use of certain technologies. And so this one big market that people like talking about, this hype around, hey, it's a global market and you must be global. Yes and no. There are advantages to being a global organization. There are movements toward this big market, but the existence of separate markets does still exist, and we have to really temper this desire to think that it's just all one big market and that's it. No, it's not. It's still a collection of a lot of smaller markets, and we have to understand how those markets differ. So international strategy is determined by market drivers, cost drivers, government drivers, and competitive drivers. And this was a globalization framework defined by Professor George Yip. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through these 4 different drivers that are kind of pushing us or leading us into internationalization. And they allow us to, this methodology allows us to identify and measure these different drivers and, what are the advantages of going international, if you will. The first would be market drivers. So in some cases, we have a standardization of market characteristics. We have, for example, similar customer needs and tastes. More and more, we see customers using consumer credit. And so the need for credit cards is something we see globally. And so if you're a credit card company, you're going to see an increased global demand for credit cards. The presence of global customers. Today, customers, if you take the example of Valeo is a automobile parts provider based in France. Well, where its customers, they're everywhere. Valeo provides products to car producers throughout the world today. Why? Because, well, the products are standard and they're able to be used in multiple different types of vehicles. And also we have a standardization of marketing characteristics. If you look, while it may not be the case for all marketing and advertising and promotion, a good example would be Nespresso ads with George Clooney. This advertisement seems to be working in many, many, many countries. And so the market is sharing some characteristics from one market to the next. The second factor that's a driver are cost drivers. By operating internationally, we can achieve potentially some significant economies of scale. Now, we've spoken about economies of scale in the past, and we've seen that economies of scale exist when I'm producing in large numbers. Well, if I can produce for an international audience and produce internationally, then I'm increasing my scale and increasing the opportunity for cost savings. I can also have cost savings through country-specific differences. Some countries offer less expensive labor, and some countries offer very unique resources. If I go and I want to, for example, produce coffee, well, I can't do that in all countries. Not all countries are able to grow excellent coffee beans. And so certain countries offer specific resources that are really driving anybody that wants to get into coffee making to these different countries. To find their beans, to source their beans, they have to become more and more international. Otherwise, the cost of the beans would be too high. And lastly, we have favorable logistics cost relative to final value. If you take the example of a microchip today, we can literally import microchips, so we can globally source microchips at a very inexpensive cost. They're very small, they're lightweight. We can bring them in, and the value of a microchip is quite important. So I can import something for a very small cost, build my product, and then sell my product to a market, and it really pays for me to import this component from abroad. It's the cheapest way to do it. Government drivers also are driving us towards international business. As I've mentioned, we've seen a reduction in barriers to trade, whether these be tariff barriers or non-tariff barriers that exist, for example, regulations on products and things like that. And we've seen an extension and an expansion of favorable trading zones. The European Union, NAFTA, all of these are encouraging us to consider international strategy. We also see an increase in the adoption of free markets. A good indicator of this would be the Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Trade Freedom. And on the top over here, you see the index for the year 2000. And the green countries is where we see a lot of freedom of international trade. And the darker, the red countries are where trade is not as free. And you can see how this map has become increasingly green over time as countries adopt more and more free trade policies. So yeah, it's actually easier today to get involved with international trade because we've seen an opening up of markets, liberalization of markets. And also because of technology standards. Technology standards allows us to export abroad more easily our products because they can be used abroad. And production technologies are becoming more and more standardized. So if I produce an input product, it can be used in multiple markets as an input. Lastly, competitive drivers. Globalization basically is a type of international strategy. It's where we basically have integrated a worldwide strategy in coordinating our activities across multiple countries. So a global organization serves a global market, but also has global production. I mean, I can have part of my R&D in one country. I can have sourcing. I can have production of some source products in another country. I can have my sales activity and after-sales services in another country. Basically, a globalized organization says, well, you know, I produce everywhere and I sell everywhere. It's one big market and one big production space. Now, this is something that we've seen being done, for example, with Ferrero. Ferrero is a chocolate manufacturer, and we see this interdependence across the company's own value chain. If you look as to where the coffee beans are, where the chocolate beans are coming from, pardon me, where they're doing the production, etc., you'll find that Ferrero its production is basically spread out over the globe, and it's using these different locations to produce a global product. This is an important point to bear in mind, because competitors today that are global like this are able to seize opportunities offered by low-cost markets, are able to make profit in one market and not in another, where they're maybe not making a lot of profit in another, so they can cross-subsidize. And when you compete against a global player, if you're only competing in one market and that market's not profitable, your competitor who is global can maybe accept a loss because they're making more profit, or they're making a positive profit elsewhere. So if you want to compete in a marketplace and you're competing against somebody that's cross-subsidizing a loss in one market with a profit in another, you may have to be able to do the same to compete. So globalization is actually pushing companies that didn't have to be global to become global in order to compete, and able to have the advantages that their competitors have.